I got a Discord message a few days ago asking me that if my account were to be completely wiped, what weapons would I prioritize first as my most important to get back? I thought this question was really interesting and could make for a fun video, so instead of compiling an objective list of the best weapons in the game, I wanted to tackle this list from my personal perspective and give you guys my own personalized list. I'm a veteran with nearly 5,500 hours on PC alone, and while this video is going to be my own opinions for what best suits my playstyle, pretty much all of these weapons are absolute top picks for just about anyone in PvE. So we'll be tackling over 20 weapons that I view as my must-have for me personally in today's video, and as I go one by one, I'll tell you not only how to get said weapon, but what perks I prioritize on it too if it is legendary. So with that said, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content, follow the Twitch channel to catch me live as we're about to hit 32,000 followers, so thank you guys so much, and let's jump into this. Also, shout out to my Patreon and YouTube members. You guys are awesome. Alright, enough talk, let's finally jump into the video and start off with by far my favorite exotic in the game, Conditional Finality. I cannot possibly describe to you just how much love I have for this thing. It comes from the Root of Nightmares raid, which is farmable this week by the way, and is easily one of the strongest raid exotics we've seen. This weapon is a double barrel shotgun that fires a stasis shot first, which will freeze your enemies, and a solar shot second, which will not only then shatter your target, but also ignite them too. This weapon took me 80 total clears to get, and it was most definitely worth the wait. Chunking down high health enemies, stunning unstops, and in general just feeling like Doom Guy makes this weapon a 10 out of 10 for me, and it's by far the first thing I would want to get back in my inventory if I didn't have it. Song of 𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗠𝗣𝗦. This weapon is a very recent addition to the game as it just dropped with the 𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗠𝗣𝗦 raid, but I've already developed an incredibly strong attachment to it. This most definitely has to do with the fact that we've had to wait years for a good arc machine gun, but now we finally have one, and hot damn is it a necessity for me. This weapon rolls with both Demolitionist and Reconstruction in the first column, with Sword Logic in the second for an overall fantastic damage buff. Not only that, but as a Titan main, I absolutely love this thing too because of its origin trait, Cursed Thrall, which allows me to basically turn any enemy into an explosive device as long as I punch and kill a target first, which can be done easily with any of my Strand, Solar, and Arc builds. I'd also like to mention that this weapon looks sexy as hell, especially if you land yourself the Adept version, so I gotta give it bonus points there too. Nation of Beasts. When it comes to PvE, the only legendary primary weapons I find myself using anymore have been SMGs and hand cannons. Hand cannons are irregular in my inventory nowadays thanks to their buff not too long ago, and I gotta say, Nation of Beasts is by far my favorite right now. It recently got its perk pool updated when the Last Wish raid received its refresh, and I find myself running Explosive Payload and Dragonfly quite a bit as of late. Now you might ask yourself why I run this weapon so much over Fatebringer, and that's because I usually always use arc builds in PvE. Heart of Inmost Titan, Assassin's Cowl Hunter, and Fallen Sunstar Warlock are all heavy in my rotation of builds, and when I'm wanting to get some element subclass synergy, Nation of Beasts is almost always my first pick. Fatebringer. Speaking of Fatebringer, why not go ahead and bring it up right quick? I rarely ever use kinetic primary weapons that are legendary, but when I do, Fatebringer is, I'm not joking here, the only one I ever use. It comes from the Vault of Glass and rolls both Explosive Payload and Frenzy at the same time, which is just a ridiculous damage buff plus reload speed on top of the intrinsic extra damage that kinetics do to non-shielded enemies. So anytime I'm running a special weapon in my energy slot and my exotic slot is already taken, I can almost always guarantee you that Fatebringer will be my kinetic. The Eremite. A lot of loot from Season of the Witch has been very undesirable for me, but the Eremite is a massive exception to that. I feel like I'm back in the Cartesian coordinate meta when Particle Deconstruction was an artifact mod, because I simply have this fusion on all the time, and rarely have I consistently used one up until this point without that mod. The Eremite has found a ton of use out of me in the new 𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗠𝗣𝗦 Reprisal, as I find myself being the one that tractor cannons the boss, and therefore need a means to deal damage. This fusion is part of the new seasonal content and rolls both Envious Assassin and Controlled Burst, and I've been using that roll non-stop since day one. It's a really effective weapon to use in boss fights while weapons auto-reload or you're using Tractor, and even in GM content when facing champions thanks to Unstopped Fusion this season. I'm no Fusion Rifle stan, but this one is officially Demon Joe approved. Apex Predator. While on the topic of the Eremite, I'd like to bring up this rocket launcher as the weapon I normally pair with it while not running tractor cannon, since both of them are solar element, and I can run solar surge mods to boost the damage of both these weapons simultaneously in a damage scenario. Apex Predator comes from Last Wish and can roll Reconstruction and Bait and Switch for when you're in a raid, or the Nightfall roll that I use all the time, Reconstruction and Explosive Light. I thought about putting the Cold Comfort rocket here, to be honest, but I much prefer the Apex Predator, not only because of the element, but also because it's just easier to get. If I started from scratch, the last thing I'd want to do is farm Ghost of the Deep again for a 100% RNG rocket. Quicksilver Storm. When it comes to my all-time favorite exotic primary, Quicksilver Storm easily takes the cake. Not only because it synergizes so well with my favorite Strand Titan builds, but also because it's not really a primary. It's a grenade launcher with infinite ammo disguised as a primary, because the more you hit targets, you generate free GL ammo on the spot and can then lay into enemies like champions or bosses for huge chunks of damage. This is of course without taking into account the fact that it generates free tangles for me on a consistent basis, which I can use for free grapples, killing ads, or giving myself woven mail with the end of the fray aspect. This weapon comes from the Lightfall DLC, and aside from Strand, this is easily one of my favorite highlights of the expansion. Witherhoard. Bro, I'm not even gonna lie to you, I am not gonna say a whole lot here. You know exactly why it's on the list, it's just a damn good weapon. Buy Shadowkeep, buy this weapon from the kiosk, profit. New Pacific Epitaph. Onto a GL that I'll actually say more than a few words about. Here we have the first ever Waveframe GL that's in the kinetic slot, and you can find it in the Ghost of the Deep dungeon. This weapon started getting a lot of use out of me when I started heavily using Heart of Inmost Light for my Arc Titan, and I wanted a means to generate a ton of grenades. Running this at my kinetic slot while it has demo and using Arc for my energy and heavy weapons ensures that I have optimal synergy with my build and allows me to throw a ridiculous amount of jolting pulse grenades. It's definitely no forbearance, but with it being in the kinetic slot, it opens up the ability to use different weapons with a waveframe, and it has demo, making it insane for many grenade-based builds out there. Speaking of forbearance, similar to Witherhoard, I'm not going to say much here, but just know that this GL might as well be an exotic the way that it has power creep so many different weapons in this game for PvE. It comes from Val the Disciple, rolls with Ambitious Assassin and Chain Reaction, and if for some reason you don't have this weapon, you're missing out on one of the best weapons in the entire Destiny franchise. Funnel Web. I remember when this weapon first ever dropped and people were using Stadia as a means to farm unlimited chests in the throne world to try to get this weapon's god roll. The god roll is Subsistence and Frenzy, by the way. Funnel Web is an absolute staple for any Void build you may be running, as just an overall solid option for any scenario. It's the little brother to the all too famous Recluse from times past, and I think that's part of the appeal as to why Funnel Web has had such a massive fan base. It looks similar, it feels the same, it sounds the same, and simply rolls with a solid perk set. It's a world loot weapon right now, but next season we'll be able to focus it from the gunsmith, as Bungie mentioned in a recent blog post. The other half. I think there's two people that exist in the Destiny community. Those who don't care about Eager Edge swords at all, and those that literally just cannot take them off. In my case, I always try to run an Eager Edge sword in any content where I can. If it's an activity where I'm not pushed down multiple power levels, then screw having a traditional heavy weapon, I'm gonna go fast instead. I recently started using this thing a lot with the release of Crota's End because of the Abyss encounter, and even though it leads to the occasional death, I'd be nothing without it. I don't want Snail Simulator when all I know is speed. Wishender. I'm not gonna lie, I feel like we're gonna see a nerf to this weapon very soon when it comes to endgame content. It one-shots anti-barriers, it one-shots red bars, it generates your super much quicker than other weapons for some reason. Like, there's quite literally no downside to using the Wishender. The community wanted Arbalest nerfed a while back because it felt like it was a no-brainer option when it comes to GMs, and now Wishender is basically what Arbalest was, but with unlimited ammo. This bow is absolutely crazy and can be gotten through the Shattered Throne dungeon. Callus Mini Tool. It's kind of funny because exactly what I said about the Funnel Web where people were on the throne world farming chests for the god roll is basically what happened with this SMG but on the Derelict Leviathan. Callus Mini Tool is how rehashing a weapon is done right, because Bungie took what was already a pretty solid yet niche SMG and gave it the perk combination that would change its status as a primary forever. That kind of sounded like something Evan F would say. In Season of the Haunted, not only did Bungie introduce the Solar 3.0 rework, but they also gave us this absolute beauty with a role of Unrelenting and Incandescent. Just like I said with Funnel Web and Void subclasses, 𝗦𝗦𝗕𝗦𝗠 Mini Tool is basically your end-all be-all weapon when it comes to running Solar. You simply can't go wrong with it, and this weapon is found in Presage nowadays via the Exotic Mission Rotator. Fixed Odds. While on the topic of weapons that are good with the Solar subclass, let's talk about the only high-impact machine gun in the game that I actually like to use. Maybe some of you guys like other high-impact frames, but I'm gonna be honest, this is the only one that I consistently use in the game, and it's one that you can get from the Duality Dungeon as it's a craftable weapon for some reason, and can roll with Field Prep and Incandescent, and my lord, do I absolutely love this thing. Put me in a Grandmaster with Solar Surge and a shit ton of enemies, and I'm going to have a blast with not only my extra reserves of ammo, but also my ability to turn the battlefield into a fiery wasteland. I've been a massive machine gun fan for a while, and this is probably one of those machine guns that's the most satisfying to use for me because of the constant fiery explosions. Dead Messenger. I'm going to be honest, this definitely wasn't going to make the list until Bungie decided to give this weapon Demolitionist as a perk that you can add when crafting. Dead Messenger comes from the Vox Obscura exotic mission and fires a wave that splits into 3 directions, while also giving you the ability to swap to any of the 3 light elements to fit whatever build you're running. Demolitionist on a weapon with this much ad clear potential is just fantastic, and if I ever notice I'm not running an exotic already, this weapon definitely fills that spot for me. 𝗧𝗜𝗠𝗘𝗧𝗏. Don't you just love when Bungie makes an exotic that not only looks exotic, not only feels exotic, but also just dominates like an exotic weapon should? 𝗧𝗜𝗠𝗘𝗧𝗏 from the Witch Queen DLC is just such a gem of a primary weapon, and I absolutely adore it. This weapon on its own is already just fantastic, and not only is this gun a weapon of sorrow that can synergize with necrotic grips, but it also synergizes with Strand on top of that, making for one of the coolest suspend builds in the game. Being able to fire tracking projectiles that spread poison, overflow your magazine, and suspend your enemies in the air is just so badass, and I don't think I've ever met someone that doesn't like this weapon. Sunshot. While speaking on an exotic I think everyone just loves, I gotta throw Sunshot in here because it's always been a powerhouse and simply got better with the new hand cannon buff. This thing is just on another level compared to many other options out there, and is such a staple for any of these Solar subclass enjoyers. Chain reaction explosions, built-in explosive rounds, and some of the best stats I've seen on the weapon just ensures that anyone that picks this hand cannon up is gonna have a great time wielding it. Heritage. I haven't quite given this weapon much use as I once did back when double slug DPS was really popular, but I still really enjoy using it from time to time as nothing quite feels like the Heritage in my opinion. This weapon comes from Deepstone Crypt and functions as a weapon you can use to absolutely chunk high health bar enemies and even bosses. It rolls with Reconstruction or auto-loading combined with Recombination for massive burst damage, or even Focus Fury if you plan on simply laying into a target. I thought about putting the Succession Sniper here, but when it comes down to it, I think I get more use out of the Heritage anyways because of how the game is right now. Playing really aggressive and in the face of your enemies, even in GM difficulty, is something you can do quite often with a pretty high reward. So yeah, shout out my boy Heritage on being a great means to burst down the big boys. Commemoration. Since we're discussing Deepstone Crypt, I can't not mention one of the greatest of all times when it comes to machine guns. I remember when sunsetting first happened and many people were upset that they may never see their Hammerhead again. Little did they know that Commemoration would be the new Hammerhead, but better. Especially since DSC got a loot refresh, Commemoration has simply been dominant because of its ability to be crafted and its insane god roll of Reconstruction and Killing Tally. There simply isn't a machine gun that's on the same level as Commemoration in the game right now. This thing is truly insane. 𝗦𝗪𝗧𝗕𝗦𝗧 SMG, or 𝗦𝗪𝗧𝗕𝗦𝗧 SMG as some people like to point out in the comments, I don't really care. Dating all the way back to Season of Arrivals was my first encounter with this absolute beauty, and all this time later you can now earn it via Operation Seraph Shield in the exotic rotator, and even get yourself a crafted version. This SMG has seen many different renditions, from its boring static roll back in Warmine, to its RNG god roll with Demolitionist and Arrivals, and now in present day Destiny I can't help but be in love with its amazing Feeding Frenzy and Volt Shot roll. This might be a hot take, but out of all the SMGs in the game, the 𝗦𝗪𝗧𝗕𝗦𝗧 SMG still remains my favorite, and in my opinion, the best one in the game by far. I absolutely love what Bungie did with its reissue, and it almost never leaves my inventory. Gjallarhorn. The final weapon in today's video, we have the legendary Gjallarhorn. See, I have a long history with this weapon, as I was the one guy in the friend group that got this to drop for him over 15 times in Destiny 1, while my other friends had to wait for Xur to sell it a second time before it became a quest exotic. Now here in Destiny 2, it's gotten through Grasp of Avarice and functions as a support exotic for rocket DPS phases and raids, and it's also just an absolute monster when needing ad clear in a pinch. I feel like if any Destiny player gives you a list of their must-have weapons and they don't mention Gjallarhorn, something is probably wrong with them. And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, those are my personal must-have weapons for PvE here in Destiny 2. If my account were to be completely wiped and I needed to build my arsenal back up, those 22 weapons would be the first on my chopping block. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed a little bit of a different style of video, and if you're listening to this after watching all the way through, I cannot thank you enough for the support on my content. I'd also like to give a shout out to these wonderful people that have been supporting my content by featuring last upload's word of the day, and today's word of the day is going to be wicked. Feature that word in your comment in some sort of way to be at the end of my next video and to get a sloppy virtual kiss from me personally. Anyways guys, that's gonna do it for me today. I hope you all enjoyed a bit of a different style of video today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.